Hi, friends. I am joined here today by Molly Nickles, a working homeschool mom. She and her husband, Ben, have two kids, aged 13 and 11. Ben is a tech systems guy for the public power company, which makes them a tech heavy family, but they read books just as much as they play video games. Molly started her homeschooling page, the Modern Homeschooler, as a way to connect with other moms who might not fit in the homeschool stereotypes. In addition to homeschooling her two kids, Molly works 25 to 35 hours a week as a content specialist for TalkBox.mom, a foreign language curriculum company. Molly, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start by just telling me a little bit about your family, yourself, and how you got started homeschooling.
So originally I started homeschooling because Ben and I, when we were first dating, he said, I want a woman who is going to stay home and homeschool my kids. So if you don't want that, then we're not going to date. So I was like, okay then. And he was homeschooled K through 12, used a Becca, and he enjoyed his experience so much that he thought it was really important that he does it for his kids. So it honestly took me until I was pregnant with Harrison for me to actually come around to the idea of homeschooling. But I knew I was supposed to marry Ben, so I figured I had time before I needed to be convinced to homeschool. So when I was pregnant with Harrison, things kind of turned just from, I used to work in the gym, and I would overhear these teachers in the public school system come in and just kind of complain about the system while they worked out. But the thing was, is they were wonderful teachers, but their hands were tied. And so they would just come in and be like, I want to do this, but I can't, and that's when it really clicked with me. I was like, wow, you can have the best, most wonderful person teaching your kids, but at the end of the day, they still have someone they have to answer to, and they can only do what has been told. So that's kind of what turned the corner for us. So we've homeschooled from the beginning. I started homeschooling Harrison when he was 4, only because he was ready. Adelaide was ready more around 9. So we did homeschooling when she was younger, but it definitely wasn't as formal as it was with Harrison, just because he was ready earlier. So we've homeschooled from the beginning, and our kids will be in 6th and 8th grade this year.
That's exciting. Well, how has your approach to homeschool changed or developed over the years?
Oh, every year it changes. I feel like I feel like it's similar to marriage, in the sense that, your first year of marriage is a honeymooning period, and there's all these things that you're doing, and it's exciting. And then as your marriage gets older, how your marriage looks changes, and it's just as good. It's just different. And so the very beginning, all we did was a Becca, because that's what Ben did. And it worked well for us, and we did it. And then as we got older, I realized certain things weren't working for me, just because I'm more of a free spirit. And so we kind of let it morph over time, to the point now where we're more along the eclectic classical method, I would say, and we still use certain parts of a Becca, actually. But I like the classical method. So each year it kind of changes and grows. I would say it has less to do with my children and more about me, which I know is kind of the opposite of what most people say. They're like, well, what does my kid want? And I'm like, well, I need it to work for me, because I'm the one teaching it. So
Yeah, I think that's so important. In fact, my friend Pam Barnhill has a post where it's something like, the most important person in the homeschool plan is not your kid.
yeah.
And I think that's really true, because both when it comes to mom's enthusiasm, that can often be kind of the secret ingredient for, encouraging our children to be engaged in what they're learning. But also, like, we have to be encouraged to keep going through the hard days. And if we're working against our own, personalities, that can really be a challenge too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think it's one of those too, if you really don't wholeheartedly believe in the program, it definitely will be a lot easier when your kids are like, do we have to do school today? And you're like, no, it's fine, because I don't feel like doing it either. So I totally agree. I totally agree with it, that's just how it is. So anyway, yeah.
Well, on your Modern Homeschooler page, which I just love your eye for color, like, I love to follow your Instagram stories, and your page is just vibrant, and I love it so much, that style. But you talk about connecting with other moms who might not fit the homeschool mom stereotype. So
Mhm.
what are some assumptions that you think people might make about homeschool moms, or homeschool moms might even make about themselves, that maybe aren't necessarily true? And if a mom is kind of feeling like the odd man out, like she's not fitting in, do you have any tips or strategies for her to kind of find her people?
Yeah, totally. Hold on. I'm going to do a total faux pas and change this mid camera because I just realized I thought my head was cut off because of how we were talking, and I just realized my head's cut off because I cut my own head off. Sorry. So
No problem.
sorry, people. And the photographer in me kept going, "Why is my head cut off?" So anyway,
Got to have the appropriate dimensions
it's
fixed.
it's fixed now. Anyway, so yeah, so I think especially, oh my goodness, even from 8 years ago when I first started school with Harrison, things have changed dramatically even from then. And like even some of the newest programs that are out now have come out in the last 4 or 5 years. It's quite remarkable the difference in ability to choose, since I started homeschooling with Harrison. And I think also the perception of what a homeschooler is has changed dramatically. And I think a few years ago, even a lot of people would say, if you homeschool, you have at least 5 children and you're very uptight, right? Like you're very uptight and, you have your own farm and the wife would never consider working outside of the home. And like all those things are great, but that doesn't necessarily have to be you if you want to homeschool. And coming from a place where I literally didn't know a single homeschooler until, well, when I was living in Europe, my best friend in Europe had homeschooled for 2 years. And that was honestly why I was like, well, if I like her and I want to maybe marry a homeschooler, I guess they can turn out all right. Like,
They're not too weird.
like literally, I was like, well, if I want to marry a homeschooler, I guess they can't all be bad. It's like literally my train of thought of if homeschooling could work. Obviously, I'm like, clearly I have a good judge of character because, like whatever. Anyway, so yeah, so I think that was the kind of the perception. And so when I would come along or I would try to join certain homeschooling groups and they would talk about their chickens and whatever they sowed most recently, and their whole lives revolving around their children, it was kind of tough for me because I was like, I can't find a place here for this, because I don't do any of those things. And so that's why I started my page. And I think that's why it's different now, because you will have a lot of moms who work from home or otherwise. And, you don't have to own chickens and sew and all the things. So yeah, I think that's how the face of homeschooling is changing.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things I love about being a second generation homeschooler. So I was homeschooled K to 12. My husband was homeschooled up through 8th grade, actually, and then went to public high school. And I love just seeing the different kinds of people who homeschool, the many different reasons why people choose to homeschool. Like, I think people assume it's always just for one reason, or everyone is just sort of, going to look the same or act the same. And there's such variety. And I think that actually gives us a lot of value. So I love, like in my local homeschool group, there are many different, different families who homeschool using different methods, different approaches. And I think we can learn a lot from each other that way, because our strengths and weaknesses even are going to be different. So we're not just reinforcing each other in the same strengths and weaknesses. I love to be able to get that perspective from other people.
Oh, exactly. And that's what it's kind of hard sometimes with my Modern Homeschooler page, because I don't ever want to make it sound like I'm dissing on that way of life. My thing was, there is a strong representation in the social media world for that type of homeschooling mom. There are few representations of me. Like when I went onto Instagram to be like, where's someone like me that I can follow and get encouragement from? I couldn't find it. And then I was like, there has to be, I understand a little bit. I'm like, we're working so much, like we don't have time to do all this other stuff. But I was like, there's got to be more people like me out there, and so that's why I started it. And it's not like the other way is wrong. Like even like yesterday, one of my friends here in town has this like massive farm, and it's gorgeous, and she has a flower farm and food farm. Well, anyways, she needed to borrow my camera, because I'm a professional photographer, and then now I'm this content specialist for TalkBox. Anyway, she's like, I really need to borrow my camera broke. Can I borrow your camera? So anyway, she gave me a box of her best things from her garden in trade for using my big fancy camera for the next 3 weeks. And I'm like, see, but that's how the community functions. Is I absolutely love going to her house. I love, being able to eat the fruits of her labor. And at the same time, I'm someone that has the ability to have an extra camera on hand and can help her, and so that's why and my best friend has 7 kids and kind of is a wild and free homeschool mom, like complete opposite of me, but that's why we complement each other so well, like you said. So, so that's why it's been a little bit tough sometimes to navigate, because I don't want to be dismissive of that type of style. It's just not representative out there,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about what it looks like to be a working homeschool mom. You work a pretty significant number of hours. I mean, just under full-time, really, with TalkBox each week. So have you always worked while homeschooling? And what are some of the things you love about working while you're also a homeschool mom?
I have always worked from the beginning. So I shot my first wedding when I was 18 years old. And then I went to photo college in LA, Santa Barbara, but I went to photography college in California, and then I worked abroad doing photography and other stuff. So photography has always been a part of my life, and I've been a professional photographer, I'd say, since I was 18, since that's when I shot my first wedding. So when my son was ready to homeschool, I was already full-fledged, we were doing weddings and all that stuff. Weddings wasn't my first calling, but I ended up doing weddings because I had children, and it allowed me to work on the weekends and do everything else from home. So, but originally I was doing commercial work and all that other stuff. So that's like, midday at 11, so that doesn't work for homeschool mom. So I did change. So when you're a working mom, the biggest thing too is to be able to find something that works within your schedule, And so, I worked from the beginning. And so what I would do is morning time is always school time. I don't work mid-morning at all, because that is the prime hours for school. I don't know too many people who are able to start school at 2 p.m. and get a good 4 hours in. Like, I don't know if that's possible. Maybe.
Maybe for a night owl, maybe.
But I'm just like, even for kids, I don't know what it is. Like kids, it's like you got to catch them in the morning. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So for me, this year is a little different. I'm getting up a little bit earlier, since I did quit photography in November of this past year, which by God's grace was an awesome decision considering COVID, like all the weddings that would have been canceled. We knew last year we were going to go ahead and quit, mostly because my kids wanted a summer, and I work 80 hours a week in the summer when I'm a commercial photographer, right? So we quit. So by God's grace, we quit right at the exact moment we needed to quit. And so we would work in the summer months. So for me, I would work usually at night, because for photography, I can work whenever I need to. Now with TalkBox, there's people waiting on me for things. I'm the earliest in my time zone because we're all telecommuters. So if I don't get something done in the morning, they're waiting for me until their late afternoon for something. So I get up at 6 a.m. and I work for 2 solid hours before we start school at 8:15. And then we work from 8:15 until around 2. Somewhere in the middle, I'm able to do about a half an hour, 45 minutes of work while my kids are doing stuff that don't require me. And then I work from 3 to 6:37, 7-ish, I would say. And then I work about 5 hours on Saturday, 5-6 hours. So my husband works 10-hour days. So for us, he doesn't get home until 5:30 or 6. So it works for me to have, in essence, a 10-hour day between school and work. So, yeah.
And what do you most like about working while you're homeschooling?
The biggest thing, honestly, is it shows my kids' work ethic, because for a lot of people, one of the biggest critiques of working is that you're dividing your time too much between homeschooling and work. And, well, what does it show your kids? And for me, I say it shows them what it means to work hard. School is just as important, and they see that because I give them the best hours of my day, which is morning. I sacrifice by waking up early before they're awake. So between the work ethic, and then also too, there's a certain passion for us, which is we love to travel. And traveling, as we all know, costs a ton of money. And so for the type of travel that we want to do. And so my kids know from early on that mom's working, so that way we can go to France, And so, yeah, so that's what I really enjoy about working, is it shows them work ethic. I include them in my work. Like we subtitle videos for TalkBox. I let Harrison subtitle some videos and so I include them in the work. We brought them on photo shoots in the past when it was appropriate. So I actually include them in the process. Adelaide used to sit on my lap while I edited, and she'd be like, I don't like that photo, Mom. You need to delete that one, or so I include them as much as I can in the process when it's appropriate and professional to do so.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
A few years ago, I started working like super, super part-time, just a couple hours a week as a virtual assistant. And then from there, I just sort of randomly started all these other things I'm doing online. And I think one of the things I love most about working, and again, I work, part-time, not quite as many hours as you do, but I love that it gives my kids a vision that like adulthood also is enjoyable. I don't know, like I want them to see that mom is a person too, that all of the things that go into making me who I am, both homeschool mom and wife and church and volunteer and community and friends, and also like my creative projects. Like I think it's really good for kids to see just how varied adult life can be. So they want to like grow up and live interesting adult lives.
Well, and I feel like there's been so many times lately, especially as my son being 13 is beginning the beginning stages of adulthood, of teaching him to be self-disciplined on a much larger scale now, where for me, I come in and work. Yes, I'm a bit autonomous by myself here, in my own little desk, but I have all these other people waiting for me to do things. And I said, the truth is there are people who can be like, I'll get to it later, but it's me making the decision to wake up to get it done, And so like, we'll be talking about something in the school day and I'll be like, well, what do you think about it when I do this for work? Like I have immediate examples of character building that I can immediately apply. Obviously we all have husbands who are working and we can say, well, dad does this. But the truth is, I think half of us wives don't really fully grasp what our husbands do at work all the time. like even Ben's job, that's very, very technical. I know what he does, but I don't know what he does in a 10-hour day.
Right.
And so for me to give very tangible evidence of something that I can do from home that I'm getting paid just as much as, a job outside of the home would, and that's kind of why I'm also having my pages, and to encourage those moms who do have daughters, who our greatest joy in life would to see our daughters grow up and be wonderful housewives, but they also maybe want to make money on the side. And I feel like a lot of times these girls go into like nursing school or they go into something that's like that. And I'm like, hey, look, there's all of these visual arts and all of these things that you can do in your home. You don't have to, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of typical jobs that housewives do outside of the home. And that's kind of also why I'm kind of gearing my page towards a little bit more, is like, there's a lot of things that you can train yourself in that will make it work out so you can be a stay-at-home mom, Yeah,
especially now that everything's moving online. There's so much more variety. I mean,
yeah,
to be an entrepreneur at home with all that flexibility is pretty great, for sure.
Yeah, I had no idea when I was doing photography, before it was cool to be a photographer, that it would be such a commodity, that it, easily traded, like even now it's like, I trade my hair dye, I do my hairstylist's pictures, family pictures once a year. And now I get my hair for free, and I get like, we just trade so much, like gym membership for a year. We did, photos at the gym, and we got to go to the gym for like, there's just so many different like things, if you think to be creative of how it could look in the future, where it doesn't pull the daughter out of the home if they don't, if the biggest goal in life for your daughter is to be a stay-at-home wife, where you can do certain things that add value to the home and show work ethic, that don't pull you away if you want that, Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. So we've talked about all these great parts about working from home while you're homeschooling. And I guess I want to pull the curtain back a little bit. Like, it's not always easy. And what are some of the challenges that come along with that? And are you doing it all the time and just, taking names?
All the time. Yeah. Well, first off, I think for me, the reason I work so much is because I only have 2 kids. If I had 5 kids, there's no way I could work 35, 40 hours a week, you know, and my 2 kids. My youngest child is almost 12. I mean, so, and also I'm young to have my youngest child be 12, you know, and I think people look at that and they're always like, how do you do so much? And I'm like, think about it right now. We and you are the exact same age. If your youngest child was 12, how would that look? And they're just like, whoa, like, you know, so
You're not carrying around a newborn while you're doing that.
right. And like my friend who's like 2 years younger than me, and her youngest child is like a year old, right? Because she has 7 kids. Like, so it's hard. A lot of people do compare what I'm doing because we're the same age in the same situation, both homeschooling. But I'm like, yeah, but my youngest kid is almost 12. Like, you know, anyways. So, yeah. So for me, the biggest struggle that I have is that my kids do say time to time, they're like, Mom, you're always working. And I'm like, well, am I always working? Or is it you see me work? Like anytime I am working, you see me working because I'm literally, my office is adjacent to the living room.
Right.
So, I mean, think about it. Am I working more than when Dad's working? Not really. No, you know, and so it's more just having open communication with the kids, why I'm working and what their perception is of working. And there's times where I've said to with the kids, well, hey, if you don't want me to work, and it really is an issue for you, we won't. We'll just have to minus like a certain amount of money from our budget. So first thing to go is going to be Netflix. And they're like, wait, hold on. So
Not Netflix.
like, so it's kind of that where anytime the hardest thing is what the kids' perception is of mom working. And so when I have a twin sister, she actually owns her own business as well. And so they have cousins who are doing the same thing. And actually my sister-in-law is also a working homeschooling mom. She's a realtor. So all 3 of us in our family. So I don't know why they get the perception that I'm working more than my sister or my realtor sister-in-law is. But so all 3 of us happen to be working homeschool moms. So that's tough. Also allowing business to not interfere with homeschool hours for sure. Like I do have a marketing meeting at 8 a.m. Monday mornings, so that I have to do. Sometimes they last up to 2 hours, but I have to prepare my kids on Sunday. Hey, school starts at 9 on Mondays instead of 8, but still you need to get going on the things that you can do, you know?
Right.
And so that's what's hard is teaching that independence early on. And I sacrifice sleep. Like now that I'm I'm kind of a little bit of a different position now with TalkBox. And so now I have a 5 a.m. Monday morning meetings as well as my 8 a.m. Monday morning meeting. So, so I sacrifice sleep, and there's a constant conversation of making sure my kids are perceiving what I'm doing correctly.
Yeah. So open communication is so important. Both the active listening, and training them to perceive and listen to you as well, kind of both sides.
Yes. And for me as a mom to realize my ultimate purpose is to make sure my kids are trained. And so they know that I'm not threatening when I say, okay, I'll quit, I'll do less work. Like they know that means I will do less work if that's really what they want. But then they're kind of like, oh no, never mind, actually, you know. So that's the hardest thing is those 2, making sure we stay on track for school, and that work doesn't get interrupted, and that school doesn't interrupt work when I actually do need to work. Like I was saying earlier before we started, is that I was interviewing an assistant earlier, and my son walked in the middle of me interviewing an assistant video chat and sharpened his pencil right there. And you kind of have to you need to stay professional depending on your job, but at the same time there's a lot of opportunity to be humbled by working while your children are home. So you kind of have to be okay with that, you know, of being like, sorry, my son needs to sharpen his pencil, and he's like, well, I'm doing school, Mom, while you're working, so there, you know. And I'm like, okay, you know. So.
Mechanical pencils, come on.
I know. Yeah, I know. I was like, that's it. I needed to, but the interviews were just 2 days ago. I was like, I am moving that sharpener out into the dining room because I'm tired of this, and I don't care how ugly it is. It's going out in the middle of the dining room. So.
Well, what are some of your strategies for kind of managing your time? I guess you've talked about really kind of blocking your time is what I hear.
Mm-hmm.
And then your energy. You mentioned, you sacrifice sleep. So how about your own kind of like health and then priorities?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do all that?
So I say I am a bit of a purple unicorn. I know that God has given me the ability to run on very little sleep, and that's how I've been since birth. Being a twin, my sister would be sound asleep, and my mom literally would get phone calls from the neighbors because I had snuck out of the house and had gone over to the neighbors in the middle of nap time. So, and I just don't require sleep. I easily function on 5 hours of sleep, and that's just, I'm one of those people. I know. And that's why I say, again, why I'm like, when people are like, how do you do all this? I'm like, that's also why I feel at peace about it, because I know God's given me certain giftings of photography and design and all that stuff. He's given me the gift of less sleep. So for me, to whom much is given, much is expected. God has given me the ability to stay awake for long periods of time. I'm going to use that for his glory, for showing my kids things, and so that I don't. So I do it by the way for nutrition wise, I do enjoy running. I do have Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid immunocompromised thyroid thing. But most of that is because of the foods we've eaten. I think a lot of people have Hashimoto's because we're the first generation. I'm 37 years old. I can't remember how old I am. Anyway, we're the first generation to grow up on processed foods, right? So like in the 80s is when all that, like all of a sudden. So I feel a lot of it has to do with the foods we eat. So we eat a lot of whole foods. I also do Plexus for vitamins. I take collagen every morning. I do a lot of that. I have a gallon jug of water that I drink every day. So it sits on my desk that's this big, and I always have water. So I do all that for health things. I've gone off of pop, diet Coke, diet stuff. So yeah, so I do all of that for my health. And to balance it out, really.
Yeah. I periodically go off Diet Coke, but then it always pulls me back.
Not to be a Debbie Downer here, but honestly, Diet Coke is linked to lymphoma, and my mom died of lymphoma 5 months ago. So not to be a Debbie Downer, but like I literally sitting in the hospital,
throw it all away.
I was like, my mom just died of lymphoma. Maybe I should lay off the Diet Coke. Like I'd already started laying it off because she had died, it's a 2-year process. But it was one of those, like, I've had like a Diet Coke. I was like, I better just drink the full on natural sugar pop over a diet aspartame Coke, so there's random stuff. I mean, I do pay attention to those things, and I buy organic and do that stuff. Now I'm not in the kitchen for 7 hours a day, as a working mom. However, I've trained my kids to cook. Right now, Adelaide is cooking an apple pie for people who are coming over later. So it alleviates me. I think that's a big thing with the working moms is the kids become independent quicker. And some people think that's a negative, just depends on who you are. But I'm like, hey, I'm working now and she's learning how to be domestic because every person needs to know how to bake an apple pie. So
and a very important life skill.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's kind of how we make it work is I allow my kids to be independent sooner. And I just don't care. I don't care if it's a little different,
Yeah. I think this is going to be a real encouragement to a lot of moms. As I was telling you before we started the interview, I think there's going to be a whole lot more parents who are finding the need to work from home full time this year while educating their children. And I'm sure for a lot of people that can feel like really overwhelming, or they may wonder like, is that even possible? Can it be done? And so I hope that just kind of hearing from you and your perspective brings them some encouragement as they face this challenge.
Yeah, I think the biggest encouragement would be is I went to a college preparatory private high school, and you would think that would mean that I had a really amazing education. But the truth was I was too busy running the student store to get any good grades. And I was too busy running cross country and running the student store. I literally in the middle of my high school days would go down to Costco and buy the food for the student store as part of my so like So that all to say, and then I did that. And then when I went to Europe, I was in, Switzerland in Geneva for a couple years. And what happened is I realized I had missed out on a lot of my education, because here I am with people who had graduated from Cambridge and whatever, and they're linguists for the UN and, the ambassadors to, Kurdistan, all this other stuff. And I was like, I need to educate myself, like, because they would talk about all sorts of things that I didn't know because I was too busy running the student store. Said that to say, though, is that although I didn't get the education I should have, even though I had the opportunity to, you're in this weird situation now where if you train your children to want to educate themselves, which is what a big part of homeschooling is, they can educate themselves when they need to for what they need to. And so although my dad is, he's an executive, and he's in the middle of getting his PhD. And, he just has his dissertation left. So even he's continuing his own education. And that's one thing my parents had taught me, that although they allowed me to kind of shirk my high school abilities, that when the time came in a foreign country by myself, I was able to pull the resources I needed to bring myself up to the status of understanding what my colleagues were talking about. And so I think that's the biggest thing now, as these people who have working homeschooling families, that if you can train them to want to educate and be like, what's important that you need to know right now, that how can you educate later, then they'll be fine, so I did. I read all the books. It was like a whole new school for me for 2 years while I was there. And even to this day, like last week, I called one of my friends that I knew from there, because she's actually a historian in London, published author. And I was like, okay, I have to teach my kids Shakespeare. I've literally never read a sentence of Shakespeare in my life. What do I read? And she was like, what? Like the horror. And she like literally lives like in the same town as Shakespeare was, whatever. And so, but that's the idea, is that if you can train your kids, like, even though you're working, I'm showing my kids, I'm giving myself resources. I'm reading my books that I have to read for work because I need to train myself. If I can train my children that they can find the people that can give them the resources that they need when they need it, they're set. So I don't think there's as much of emphasis right now, especially this year, that you need to make sure they learn everything as is the character training,
Yes, not so much to worry about learning every single little fact that you think needs to be forced into their brain, but if you can encourage them to want to learn and then to know how to learn, that's the biggest gift you can give your students.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, before we close this season, I'm going to be asking each of my guests the same 2 questions before we close. So I wanted to ask first, what are you reading right now?
Well, I'm reading my EOS book. And, well, I've got my 3 books right here. I'm reading Shakespeare, Eloquence, Shakespeare book. Apparently, it's the #1 book to read to tell your kids why Shakespeare is important. And then, what the heck is EOS?
I don't know.
And these are my 3 books I'm reading at the same time. Building a Story Brand. So, all work related right now. Well, work and school. Nothing exciting.
Well, I don't know. I'm a big fan of Shakespeare, so I think that one sounds really great.
Cool. Yeah.
And then, we've sort of touched on this already, but what would you say, if you could say one thing to a new homeschool parent this fall?
When you ask for advice, make sure you're asking the person who would have the right answer. Meaning, if you really are if you want to be a classical educator, then don't ask your best friend who's wild and free what they're doing for homeschooling. And I would say, if you don't know what your method is that you want, look at children you admire and ask that parent what they're doing, instead of what your bestie or whoever Instagrammer on the internet does, because that will take you much further in your quest to find what works for you than trying to fit in with what your best friend is doing.
Super smart. Well, Molly, where can people find you all around the internet?
The Modern Homeschooler. That's it, modernhomeschooler.com. And I mean, if you want, you can go talk to me at Talkbox. Well, actually, no, I don't talk on there very much anymore, but you can see me over there randomly or see my children. I use them in my promo videos that I have to create for Talkbox. So you'll see them over there. But yeah, just the Modern Homeschooler, and that's it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, and I will see you in your Instagram.
All right. Thank you. Bye.